You're listening to Well and Weird with Holly Lowery, a podcast about creating healthier relationships with food, health, beauty, and your body. My guests and I talk about healing these parts of ourselves through intuitive eating, body acceptance, spirituality, and weird self-care practices. So to get more info on today's episode and past episodes, you can visit hollylowry.com/podcast. Now let's get on to today's weird conversation. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Well and Weird. I'm your hostess, Holly Lowery. Guys, it's so good to be back for another solo episode. However, it's funny, I have been thinking in the last couple weeks, what do I want to do for this episode? And it's been like blank. Usually I'm like very keyed in with, yep, this is exactly what I'm talking about because this is what's present or apparent or I'm feeling called to talk about and share right now. But this one kind of stumped me. So I did some thinking and I literally shut it off. I shut everything down, closed my eyes today, and just waited. And you're probably like, Holly, why wouldn't you just not do an episode? But these are my favorite way. I should say these solo episodes are my favorite way to connect with you guys. I love doing the interviews, and I also love my segment with Haley, our Resonant and Relevant segment. But I feel like this is, in my solo episodes, I feel like this is my way of offering the healing that I know I have to share with the world. So this is almost like a mini lesson, if you will. You know, I do teach my clients. I put together courses. Sorry, you guys already know if you've been listening. My dog has a way of being really noisy every time I press record, pretty much. I think she just knows. So if you hear anything in the background, that's her. But anyways, I feel very, very called to share my experience and what I know about body acceptance and intuitive eating and recovery with the world. And these solo episodes really honestly offer a space for me to do that with people regardless of their level of access to external support. So that's why I really love doing these, and that's why I would not skip out on you guys. And I'm really trying going forward to make sure that you guys have fresh stuff every week. However, I really wanted to make sure that this one was resonant with me because I know that when I am tapping into what feels right for me to share right now, that's when people are like, yes, Holly, I needed to hear this, rather than forcing it and faking it. So I do, after some deep reflection and really just digging into what feels present right now, what needs sharing, what needs talking about, what needs some light shed onto it. I want to talk about the word recovery today. And for a really long time, I did not identify with this word. I actually didn't like this word. I shied away from it. I often used it in air quotes, which you probably think is pretty funny because now I pretty openly tell people I recovered from disordered eating. But for a really long time, I associated recovery with weakness, because to be in recovery, you would have to be recovering from something, some ailment, some quote failure, some weakness, some lack of control, right? So for a really long time, it was something I did not identify with or use to describe myself or my journey. And what's funny is that I have also been weary of using this word in my business, even though this is what I help people do, because I know other people feel the same way about the word recovery. I know other people shy away from it because to admit that you are in recovery, to say that you are in recovery, is vulnerable. It's pretty much admitting to, you know what, yeah, I need help, and I'm taking the time to get help, and I'm not perfect. And we all logically know nobody is perfect, but it takes some freaking guts to admit it. It takes some guts to identify with being in recovery, to know when it's time to ask for help, to know when it's time to press pause and try to change and shift gears. So anyways, I for a really long time, was afraid to fully embrace this word in my own coaching practice. And then I was like, but why? This is what I help people do. And so then I started thinking about, well, okay, how can I shift people's mindsets around the word recovery? What is the root of the reason that we don't like this word, that we shy away from using this word, that we're so afraid to identify with being in recovery? And so I got digging and I started looking at the definition of recovery. And let me just quick pull up Google's definition. Okay, so Google's definition, it has two per usual. So the first being a return to a normal state of health, mind, or strength. And the second being the action or process of regaining possession or control of something stolen or lost. And I think that both of these, this is a basic definition. I can't argue with it, right? However, I think for the purposes of talking about recovering from body dissatisfaction, recovering from disordered eating or an eating disorder, wanting to get to a place where your relationship with food and with your body isn't so messy, isn't so weird, I created my own definition. And I think that this one makes it a little bit more approachable to people. So this is my definition. So recovery for me is a return to a normal state of health, mind, body, and spirit by taking action to regain possession of a power stolen from you by disordered behaviors or thoughts. And so this might be specific to the people who are listening to this community who's looking for some peace with food in their bodies. But I really truly believe, especially that last part, that it is a return to normal state of health, mind, body, and spirit by taking action to regain possession of the power that was stolen from you by disordered behaviors and thoughts. So it's kind of a combo of Google's definition. But let's tease apart that last piece. So to be in recovery means that you're ready to take action, that you're no longer willing to let this cultural nonsense about what bodies should look like, about the way we should be eating, that you're no longer willing to let that thing take away your power. That you're no longer willing to let the disordered behaviors and thoughts that have come from the culture, you're no longer willing to let those behaviors and thoughts have power over you. So I honestly feel and want other people to feel that recovery is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength. It is a sign that you are determined and ready to take back your power, to take action, to move forward, to get out of this icky place that you're in. And I also want to open up that definition of recovery because I think that often people, and I was in this boat personally, I was never diagnosed with a full-blown eating disorder. Although had I sought treatment, I probably would have been. But for me, I identified more with the disordered eating because it manifested through trying to control my health, which we all, or I shouldn't say we all, a lot of us know is classified as orthorexia when we're so concerned with our health that it becomes unhealthy. So for me, I didn't identify with being in recovery because I thought it was a word that was just reserved for those who were in recovery from a full eating disorder. But the thing that I want you to know is that you don't have to hit rock bottom. You don't have to be diagnosed before you decide that it's time to change, before you decide that it's time to climb back up, before you decide that it's time to take back your power. You don't have to do it alone just because you're, quote, not as bad as you could be, or things aren't as bad as they could be, or things aren't as bad as, a friend of yours or someone else that you know or have seen go through this stuff. You can literally decide to recover from a lot of things that aren't a full-blown eating disorder. And honestly, that could be recovery from yo-yo dieting, years of weight cycling, years of disordered eating, or what I have been recently calling food weirdness, that spectrum of food weirdness. which is simply that your relationship with food or fitness or your body is not as healthy as it could be. You could decide that you want to recover from the guilt and shame and fear that's wrapped up in all of this stuff around food and with your body. You could decide to recover from body dissatisfaction or negative self-image, self-hate, self-harm. You can decide it's time to recover from feeling unworthy, from feeling broken, from perfectionistic tendencies, people-pleasing tendencies. You can decide it's time to recover from the desire to always be in control. You can decide it's time to recover from having an unhealthy preoccupation with health and wellness, again, so much so that it becomes unhealthy, it becomes an obsession, it rules your life. You don't have to be at the bottom. You don't have to hit a wall with yourself to decide that it's time to recover and to own it, right? So now that I've kind of broadened this definition of recovery, so that for those of you who are listening and you're like, I'm not in recovery. I don't know. I got some stuff to work on, but I'm not in recovery. I hope that you can own that. I hope that you take it as a sign of power and strength. And now that we've kind of talked about that, I want to tease out some of the themes that I feel are super present and super important to address and assess and dig into and embrace in this recovery process. Okay, so I have 9 themes. Why 9? I don't know. I think 10's too many. But these ones, I just want to say, these are not from anybody's textbook about eating disorder recovery or body dissatisfaction recovery or whatever you're in a recovery from. These are not, from a 12-step program. They probably overlap, I'm sure. These are not from Carolyn Costin's program, although, again, they probably overlap, I'm sure. These are just themes that I've found important in my own healing process. And kind of side note, if you still don't feel like you're ready to embrace the term recovery, maybe healing feels more approachable for you. Totally okay. I'll probably use them interchangeably throughout today's episode. But these themes have been really important in my process and are still really, honestly, a lot of these are still really important in my everyday currently. That doesn't mean that I haven't recovered, but I think that we always have healing that we can do. And a lot of these themes are really important for me to make sure that I'm incorporating and thinking about and embracing and feeling my way through on the regular. Because if I ignore a lot of these things, well, then we can experience some setbacks. And that doesn't mean that you failed at healing or failed at recovery. That is often a part of the process, often a necessary part of the process. But these are things that I know for me have been crucial. I know for me have been really, really essential to getting where I'm at with this positive relationship with my body, positive relationship with myself. So I want to share, and I hope that you guys, maybe you make your own list. And I'm sure that after I record this, there will probably be things that I'm like, I wish I'd included that. But these, for me, are the 9 essential themes, tools, things that I know were super important to have in my recovery process, in my healing process. So the first, you're probably not going to be surprised when I tell you that it's self-care. Number 1 is self-care. And not in the typical, like, go get a mani-pedi, put a lavender pillow over my eyes kind of self-care way. I've been, and if you guys follow me on Instagram or are part of my newsletter, you probably see this, hear this all the time that I'm talking about self-care. And honestly, I have to every single day make sure that I am doing something and or a lot of things for myself. For instance, that could mean making sure that I wash my face when I go to bed, because for a really long time, that's something I would not do. That could mean putting on Netflix when I've literally just been consuming all day, consuming media, consuming responses from clients, consuming responses from people in person, taking on energy. So that could mean just zoning out, turning off my brain with Netflix. That could mean making myself a cup of tea or whatever this weird drink that I'm drinking right now is, which is cacao and coconut oil and honey and pea milk, PEA, like peas. Anyways, so self-care for me is not your typical like la whatever. I don't even know. I think all self-care is good self-care. But I don't want you to roll your eyes when you think about self-care. I want you to embrace self-care. And the way that you can do this, and I just taught this in a recent workshop, is to think about what are your inputs and your outputs? What lights you up? What brings you energy? What fills you up with life? And what drains your energy? What dims your creative spark? What takes away your desire to move and shake and do and be in the world? Thinking about those two things, your inputs, your outputs, and then think about what activities, what processes, what people, what places, what things feel like they contribute to your inputs. What practices contribute to that all lit up feeling, right? And so for me, that's how I think about self-care. Like I said, that could be Netflix. That could be ordering in. That could be a glass of wine. It doesn't have to be all the things that the wellness world wants you to think about what it means to be well. What keeps you well? If that means coming home, putting your feet up, ordering takeout, popping a bottle of champagne, have at it. My gosh. If it's your only coping mechanism, if that's your every night, okay, maybe we want to press pause and dig into that a little deeper. But let yourself take care of you in the ways that feel resonant. Self-care should not be another thing that you're shoulding all over yourself for. Self-care should literally just be pausing, asking yourself, what do I need in this moment? What would make me feel taken care of? What would make me feel nourished? What would bring me back to center? What would make me feel the way I want to feel right now? Sometimes we need to feel the icky stuff. We need to feel sad. We need to be angry. We need to grieve. So in those moments, when you're trying to think about self-care, what can you do to feel those things to their fullest so that you can one day release them? If you're grieving over the loss of a loved one and you're pissed off and you are sad and your heart breaks, how can you take care of yourself in those moments? If you are pissed off that you still are struggling with your relationship with food and with your body, how can you embrace that anger? I'm not talking about lashing out at someone you love, but how can you feel through that? Maybe it means, cliche here, but like punching a pillow or screaming into the pillow or dancing around like a maniac in your living room to some like angry music and getting it out. Whatever that means for you, how can you feel what needs to be felt? Take care of yourself in that moment and let it go. Self-care, so important. And honestly, I use the term self-care probably way too much in my own life and in my coaching practice, but there's a reason for it, and this is the reason. I think that self-care honestly is where the foundation for healing is built. When you lay a solid foundation for a house, for instance, you pour your concrete, you dig it into the ground. I don't know much about building houses, but I think that's how it goes, right? Like you dig your foundation, you pour the foundation, and then like you build your house. Well, if you build this foundation, a solid foundation of self-care, you've got your practices, you've got your go-to coping mechanisms, you've got your people, you've got the things that make you feel taken care of. You build your house, you go through your life, and a storm hits, a really bad one. A hurricane comes, or maybe a blizzard, depending on where you live. We have a blizzard going on right now where I live. But you've got this solid foundation of self-care built, and that's going to help you weather whatever the storm looks like, right? So if you are constantly taking care of yourself, when things get rocky or things take a turn or something big comes your way and you're not sure how to handle it, You've got a solid foundation supporting you through whatever that thing is, so that you know, okay, I know this is hard, but I know I can do it. I've been through it before, or I've been through equally as tough things before. I am strong, and I know that because I have this amazing foundation that I've built myself, I am strong enough to get through whatever this is. And so prioritizing self-care for me is huge. And wrapped up into that one is my number 2 theme for today, or theme of recovery, which is setting boundaries and saying no. You're probably like, what does setting boundaries and saying no have to do with self-care? For me, this is a huge act of self-care. For a really long time, and honestly, still something I have to work on, but it's better. I struggle with saying no to people. I struggle with feeling like, what if I disappoint that person? I feel guilty if I say no, or if I back out of something that I committed to. I struggle to say no because I want to be liked. And especially as women, I literally feel like every single one of my clients, this is something I work on with them. This is a recurring theme, which is funny because when I started my practice, I don't think I ever would have thought that that was going to be the case, but it is. We want to people please. We want to be accepted. That's where a lot of our struggles with food and body image come from, right? Because we want to be accepted. We want to feel loved. We want to feel appreciated and admired. And we think that if we say yes all the time, and we do the things that make people happy or that people want us to do, we'll feel liked, we'll feel admired, we'll feel appreciated, we'll feel loved, accepted, all those things, right? But the truth of the matter is, if you're saying yes when you consistently want to say no, that is gonna scrape away at that foundation of self-care. That is going to deteriorate your level of well-being. It is going to deteriorate your ability to heal. Because if you are prioritizing other people's shit over your own, that is no way to live. And it might feel temporary, like, oh, I just got to get through this thing. Then I can start to say no. I'm going to call bullshit on that. Because I've been there, and I know how easy it is to be like, oh, let me just get through this one thing. It'll be a couple weeks. I'll get it done, and then I won't ever do this again. But then you say yes to something else that you don't want to say yes to. And until you start to, it's literally a practice. For my clients, honestly, I really think now at this point, every single client I've had, I ask them to practice saying no once a day to something. And there are going to be days when they don't say no to something. But it's more about practicing and about being aware of all the things that we say yes to that we don't want to say yes to. How many times have you agreed to have, a coffee with somebody, but you're really like, I don't care about this. How many times have you stayed at a job because you're afraid of disappointing your boss or disappointing your coworkers? Right? How many times have you agreed to a project that you're like, I don't care about this? Start saying no. Start saying no to little things at first if it feels really hard to tell your boss no or tell your partner no or whatever. Also, you should never feel afraid to tell your partner no. I'm just going to say that much. So start saying no to the little things. Start saying no when a random person you meet on the street asks you for a favor. It doesn't have to be mean. It's literally an act of self-care. And something to ask yourself in those moments is this going to nourish me? Or is this going to take away from how nourished I feel? In my heart, in my soul, in my head, in my body even, right? Start saying no. Set those boundaries. I like to think of it as like leaky boundaries when we are always saying yes to things we don't want to say yes to. Set up some structure. If you've got If you feel chaotic, especially right now, which a lot of us feel chaotic, unfortunately, part of that is the pace of our crazy world. Part of that is the recovery process, that it feels really chaotic. Part of that is that we're trying to heal something and we're working really hard and we wish it was done and it's not. And so it feels like we're just in this state of chaos. Embrace some of that. There's a little bit of room for chaos, but if it feels like you're spinning all the time, set some boundaries. Say no to things. Ask for what you need. Put in place some systems, some routines that are going to help you center back in to yourself, that are going to help you take care of yourself. Right? So that's number 2. Number 3, routine and systems. See how these all kind of weave together? I don't know if they'll go like that through the whole episode, but so far it's gone good. Routines and systems. And this is, again, kind of linked to the boundaries thing. But for me, I know that putting in place a routine on the regular is so crucial. One, because it just helps me feel like I'm got my feet on the ground, right? Like I'm not always in my head. Like I'm not always spinning out of control. Like I'm not always in chaos. But 2, it helps me self-care. So this is a very specific example. But for me, I hate that I use this word to describe myself, but right now I am very busy. I have my hands in a lot of different baskets. I'm wearing a lot of hats, which feels really fun, but also really whirlwindy. And so I know there are days, and there have been days not so long ago, like maybe just a couple weeks ago, where I forget to eat, which is crazy. It sounds crazy, I know. I'm an intuitive eating coach. I'm a recovery coach. But the reality of it is, I know in those moments, it's not a fault. It's part of my process. I know that for me, it's not necessarily a setback because I know that all I have to do is just eat to get myself back to status quo. But anyways, because I've been wearing so many hats, I feel crazy busy, and I will leave the house in a rush and forget to bring, my second breakfast with me. Or I'll forget to bring snacks. Or I will be in the midst of doing something like this and push lunch way too long and eat way too late and feel ravenous. And that is so not where I want to be at, right? And so setting up a routine where I wake up at a reasonable time, I can sit and have my coffee, I can make sure that I make myself and my partner breakfast, that we both have snacks for the morning, that I either bring a lunch or, get a lunch out if I'm out working, and that I have snacks for after that. So setting up a routine where I know, okay, I have my breakfast and I got my blender bottle with my protein powder so I can have my smoothie, and then I'm going to have my lunch, and then I've got some trail mix if I get hungry between lunch and dinner, and then I've got stuff in the fridge or the freezer for when I get home. And it's so simple. You're like, Holly, how is that a routine? For me right now, this feels like a routine. A routine I need is to have the morning where I just spend 5 minutes preparing whatever it is that I need to make sure that I am fed through the day. And, on one hand, it's really kind of cool to be like, wow, I am so in love with the work that I'm doing that I don't want to press pause on it. But I also know I cannot do my best work. I cannot do the things that I love to do, the things that light me up. I cannot do them to the fullest if I don't take care of myself. If I don't sleep, if I don't eat enough, if I don't rest, if I don't take time for myself, if I don't press pause, right? So I've got to set up some routines and some systems to get myself where I need to be. So if you're somebody who maybe is, if you have a team of a dietitian or a therapist, and maybe you're working on a meal plan, or maybe you're just trying intuitive eating for the first time, start to think about the kinds of routines that are going to help you feel more solidified, more able to do this thing? What kind of systems do you need in place? Maybe that means going to the grocery store on a certain day. And I'm using a lot of food-related stuff here, but I feel like this resonates with you guys, so I'm just going to go with it. What kind of systems do you need? Right? And what kind of self-care do you need to make sure that those systems stay in place? For instance, if your system that you're putting in place is, every morning I get up and I spend 10 minutes prepping some food for the day. Well, what kind of self-care do you need to make sure that happens? Does that mean you shower at night? Does that mean you go to bed earlier? Does that mean instead of watching the news in the morning, you turn off the TV? Think about what kind of self-care you need to make sure that routine sticks. If this is truly a routine that you need, don't put in place BS routines. Like, you don't need more stuff to do. A routine and a system is supposed to be a way to simplify, to streamline, to make easier for you to tackle the things that you're trying to tackle, to heal, right? Okay, number 4, you've got to have your team. Got to have your club, your support, whatever that looks like for you. For people who definitely are recovering from an eating disorder, you need a whole roster of people standing behind you to support you. You need your dietitian, you need a therapist, you might need a partial hospitalization program where you have literally a whole bunch of women doing this healing with you, and you have a whole team of different types of therapists to help you. You might need a coach to hold you accountable to all the things that you're trying to put in place with those practitioners. You might need a really supportive friend, family member, partner to help you at home. You need a team. You might even just need your dog to cuddle with, to know that you're not alone. You need a whole team of people. This can also be virtual. I know for some of us, like myself included, I have a whole little online fam of people that I connect with, that I resonate with, people that I follow who lift me up and remind me when I'm having a tough day why it is that I do this work, why it is that I've chosen healing and recovery. So you need a whole lineup of people to make sure that that they have your back, that your back is had. I don't know if that makes sense, but this support is super necessary. And oftentimes I ask my clients, what kind of support do you need? That could look like a system, right? That could be a system. What about asking your coach for some extra support through the week via text message or via email? What about going to your therapist every week at the same time? That's a system and support in and of itself, right? That's a routine and support. See how these things all overlap. So you are gonna need this support, because what inevitably happens is the recovery process is not linear, and this is nothing new. You guys have probably heard me say that before. The healing process is not linear. Growth is cyclical. Right? We're constantly kind of learning similar lessons over and over and over again, but they always apply in a different way, and every time we learn something a little bit different. But gosh, there are good days and there are not so good days. But you're going to need somebody to turn to on those not so good days. You're going to need something to fall back on, because you can't always do it yourself. It's okay to ask for guidance, right? I did an Instagram post about this recently, that it's okay to ask for guidance from friends, from family, from professionals, from the universe, right? And that brings me to my next one, which is number 5, my next theme, my next non-negotiable through the healing process, which is connection to spirituality. And for me, this is a huge support. It's also a part of my routine, where I sit down most mornings, not every morning, or most days, I should say, because sometimes it's through the middle of the day or before a client session. I prefer to start my day this way. where I sit down and I connect back to myself and I affirm my own spirit and I affirm whoever else's spirit that I'm with or that I'm about to be with, that I'm about to hold space for, and I ask for guidance from the universe, right? And that's a little woo-woo, but that is what it is. That's what we talk about here. But that support, my gosh, that does it for me. And whether you believe in a Christian God or a Buddhist God, or maybe you don't believe in a God at all, you believe in a goddess. Maybe you don't believe in a God or a goddess, but you believe in Mother Earth or nature. And that is your connection to spirituality. Whatever that looks like for you, having this practice not only provides that support, but it also strengthens your connection to self. It grounds you back in, and it allows you to tap into your intuition and your awareness, right? And there are other tools that you can use to tap into your intuition, tarot being one of them, journaling being another. But I think it starts with this connection to something a little bit bigger than ourselves, right? To turn to something, again, whether that be God or the universe or nature for you, to turn to something and just ask for support, to have faith, right? To have that faith in something that's bigger than you, knowing, honestly, sometimes all I have to do is look up at the sky to be reminded that, one, my problems are not as big as they might feel in that moment, and two, I'm going to be okay because tomorrow the sky will still be there, regardless of where my brain is at, right? So having that connection allows you to pause, recollect yourself, ask for the support you need, tap back into your own intuition and knowing to ask for what you need in the first place, and make sure that what you're asking for is in alignment with yourself, your values, your desires, your deepest, darkest needs. To tap back into your awareness so that you can regularly be aware of what's going on in your head and in your heart and in your body. So often when we are feeling really weird on the spectrum of food weirdness or body weirdness, we dissociate from ourselves. We don't feel our feelings, we think through them. We dissociate from our bodies, where we just kind of walk around in them, but aren't really embodied. We're not really in them. And so this awareness practice could be, or this spiritual practice could literally be just sitting and breathing, asking for support, paying attention to your body as you're breathing, paying attention to what sensations might be going through your body, right? It's so simple, but it is huge. I'm not going to talk too much more about that because I do have a whole episode on how spiritual practice is really crucial in this whole process, and I will link to that in the show notes too. Okay, theme number 6, which is to explore your values, your worthiness, explore the love or respect that you have for yourself, to work on respecting and accepting yourself, right? And for a lot of us, body love doesn't feel very attainable. That's okay. That doesn't have to be your goal. But what if you can work towards neutral? What if instead of trying to love yourself when you look in the mirror, what if you just tried not to hate yourself? What if you brought it back to neutral? Right? And this is a practice. This could mean covering up all mirrors for a while. This could mean intentionally going to the mirror and reciting some affirmations about respecting yourself and accepting yourself. Honestly, one of the biggest things I did, which felt so hard way back, was when I was really struggling, and I don't even know what compelled me, but I looked in the mirror for the very first time ever and held my stomach. I just touched myself in a way, in an area that I ignored because I hated it. I thought it was awful. I was always trying to change that part of me to make myself smaller. And I touched myself and I held myself and I said, you are okay. This is okay. You are good the way that you are. You are beautiful. And it felt kind of phony and forced at first, and then it didn't. And just thinking about it right now, I'm like, when's the last time I did that? I probably need to do that. And it is this simple act of bringing it back to neutral, the simple act of just honestly being embodied, of getting back to those parts of yourself that you try so hard not to feel, and bringing it back to neutral. And it's a practice, and it takes a willingness to explore these things, to explore what it is that you do like about your body, to explore what it is that you respect about your body and all the things that it does for you and allows you to do, to explore what it is that's actually important to you outside of the physical world, outside of your physical body. What values do you hold? How is your relationship with food and with your body right now? How does that affect your ability to work towards those values, to work towards aligning yourself to those values? Is all the time and energy you've been spending worrying about your body, worrying about food, worrying about health, trying to diet, trying to change your body and yourself, is that really in alignment with your values? Sometimes answering these things is really hard. I'm definitely not saying it's easy, but it is a willingness to come back to yourself, to ask yourself these questions, to get curious, to dig in, maybe journal it out, and just see what comes up. To see what comes up. And that brings me to number 6, 7? I don't know what number I'm on. I'm just going to keep going. Which is the willingness to learn. To, instead of looking at what might be considered a setback in this process, instead of looking at it as a setback, looking at it as a learning experience. Looking at it as an experiment. And this comes down to practicing non-judgment, but if you're having, like, for instance, my example that's been relevant for me in the last couple of weeks, where I just am like, go, forget to eat because I'm not ready to press pause on whatever project I'm working on, and then get to a point later in the day where I'm ravenous and I'm not eating mindfully and I'm not eating according to my intuition because I ignored my intuition. I ignored those feelings, right? Am I willing to, instead of looking at that as a setback or a failure, am I willing to look at that and learn and say, well, what do I need to know from this experience? Well, again, bringing it back to this example, probably that I should have eaten more in the earlier parts of the day. Probably that I've not been paying as much attention to my self-care as much as I'd like to think I am. Probably that I need to keep some kind of snacks in my bag for when I'm going on the road and don't have access to other things. Probably that I need to get back into my routines in the morning or strengthen that routine somehow, right? So instead of looking at it as a setback and saying, oh my gosh, how am I still stuck here? Why am I not done with this? Taking it as a learning experience. What do you need to learn from that moment? And it's this willingness to be resilient against those things, to push through them, not judge them, knowing that they're a part of your process, a very, very necessary part of your process, because you need to learn whatever it is in that moment in order to move through it, right? And this stuff takes patience. And again, it takes resiliency, and it takes a conscious effort on your behalf to not judge, but to get curious about what it is that you need to know, what lesson you need from that, right? Number 8, you gotta have a creative outlet. And I don't want you to get stuck on, well, I'm not a creative person, I'm an analytical person. Don't get stuck on that, okay? This could literally be anything that just makes you feel joyful. Maybe for you that looks like running. Maybe that's a creative process. Maybe for you that looks like organizing your drawers, or your bedroom. I don't know. Something that makes you feel connected and lit up. And for me, this is a lot of things. This is journaling, this is dancing, this is walking my dog, this is writing, this is this podcast. It's tarot and journaling through tarot. It's tapping into my intuition. It's a lot of things. Maybe I've expanded the definition of creativity too far for some people's likings. But this creativity enables me to get out of my head back into my heart. And this is so important, guys, because we spend so much time up in our heads. And oftentimes that's where that inner critic voice lives. Some people call this the eating disorder voice. Some people call this the illogical side of their brain. Some people call this the monster within. Some people call this the negative self-talk spiral, whatever you call it. By having a creative outlet, you can pretty much instantaneously, if you're willing to tap into it, get out of your head and back into your heart, which is where all the good stuff happens, right? That's where we experience joy. That's where we experience transformation, is in our hearts. And with having a creative practice or process, it also enables you to share your story. And not everybody's willing to share their story with everybody. That's totally okay. But by speaking what it is that we're experiencing and going through and struggling with, it no longer feels like it's eating us alive because it's out of us, right? We've released it somehow through a creative practice. Which leads me to our last theme, number 9, again, very connected to this one, which is a sense of purpose, having a sense of purpose, having something where you feel like there is a whole lot more going on that you are contributing to outside of yourself and outside of this struggle, that this struggle, whatever it is, isn't your whole life, right? That you've got something to get up for in the morning, that you've got something bigger and better and bolder to focus on. You've got something that lights you up, and this can be connected to that creative practice. It can be something bigger than that. It can be a new project. It could be an adventure. It could be a major life change. It could be moving to a new city. It could be your person. It could be whatever it is, something that is bigger, that gives you a sense of purpose, that makes you excited to wake up in the morning. And if you don't have that thing, well, then we've got to dig back into your values and first think about and get really clear on what is it that it's important to me. And how are the actions that I'm taking every single day in my life in alignment with these or out of alignment with these values? And what other actions can I take to get my life back in alignment with the things that I'm saying are important to me? And out of that process, out of that digging in, you're going to find something that gives you a sense of purpose, I promise. And when you have that sense of purpose, that thing that lights you up, that thing that feels like it's your calling, and you're regularly tending to that, the desire to control your body, the desire to keep tabs on your body, the desire to be super rigid with food, it doesn't feel as strong. No, maybe it's not perfect. Maybe it's not completely gone. Maybe those thoughts still spark up here and there. But it all of a sudden just feels so much less important, right? All right, guys. Those are the 9 themes themes and things. I guess they're things, right? Yeah, they're things. The 9 things that I know for me have been absolutely crucial in this recovery process, in this healing process. So I hope that you liked this. I hope that you got some truth bombs out of this, some little nuggets to tuck in your pocket and put to work in your own life, to take action with in your own life. I do want to say that if you really love this episode and want more and want to take action and are ready to do this thing, I would love to help you do that. I work one-on-one with people who are going through this process of healing and recovery. And again, recovery does not just mean that you are struggling with a full-blown eating disorder. You could choose to recover from body dissatisfaction, from perfectionistic tendencies, from the urge to control. You can choose to recover from an obsession with health and wellness, so much so that it deteriorates your life and runs your life. You can choose to recover from years of yo-yo dieting and detoxing and self-loathing. You can choose to accept your body. That in and of itself is recovery from diet culture, right? So I would love to be your support through that, or at least part of your support team through that. If that's of any interest to you, I will put a link in the show notes and you can explore more how we might be able to work together. You can also, if you're not quite ready for one-on-one help, but do want to take some really strategic action, you can go through my Food Freedom Formula e-course, which is available on demand. You can get it, download it, buy it, do it today. I'll also put a link to that in the show notes. If you really love this episode and want to make more of these happen, you can drop me a line. A great way to do that is just by being on my newsletter. You can always hit reply. That goes to my personal email, which maybe I shouldn't be telling you guys that, but I want to hear from you. So drop me a line. Tell me how much you liked it. Tell me what you want more of. I'm always looking for suggestions. And that could be suggestions for guests as well. If you guys like this, want to hear more of it, you can also leave me a rating or review in iTunes. That helps other people find these podcast episodes and these messages and gets them into the ears of people who really, really need to hear them, who are going through the same stuff, who could use this extra support and light in their life. You can follow me on Instagram if you want to connect deeper. I share a lot of behind the scenes. I really like to write Instagram captions, so my pictures may not be the most wonderful, although I think they look pretty great myself. Very aesthetically appealing. But my captions are where it's at, as well as stories, lots of behind the scenes of what it looks like to be healing from this stuff, to be employing intuitive eating, to take on the anti-diet in full swing. Connect with me there. Get on the newsletter. Those are basically free coaching emails every week. And if you want some extra support, I'd be happy to connect with you there too. Okay, guys, before we completely let this go, I want to quick remind you about our sponsor and share them with you. So our sponsor this week and every week is Circles of Change. And Circles of Change is a movement created by my favorite nonprofit, Ophelia's Place, in an effort to change the culture and the conversations that we're having around health, beauty, and body image. I have the pleasure of working with Circles of Change every single day to change the culture and the conversations that we're having. But we really want you guys to join us as warriors for change. So all you have to do to become a warrior is head to the Circles of Change website, which again, I will put a link in the show notes to. Take our pledge, and from there you can explore all sorts of different ways to act as a warrior, to give back to this cause, to start spreading more awareness and education around this cause. If you want to contribute to the work of Ophelia's Place, which provides support and treatment for those who are struggling with disordered eating disorders, and body dissatisfaction, you can also make a donation there. You can buy some swag, which spring line will be out soon. There's some really good stuff coming. And because you're a podcast listener, you get 10% off from their marketplace on the website by using the code WELL and WEIRD. That is WELL and WEIRD, all one word. And you get 10% off with them from me because we love you guys and we want you to take part as a warrior. We want you to embrace this messaging and share it with the world. And if that means sharing it on your chest and on your heart, wearing that on your sleeve, literally, we love that. And we want to give you the tools to do that. So circlesofchange.org, link in the show notes. We'd love for you to pledge as a warrior. We also are looking for story submissions. So if you are willing to share your story and get vulnerable and talk about your recovery process, amazing. Small disclaimer, we have full capability of editing that to make sure that there are no triggers in there for people reading. So just know that going in. But connect with us there. We would really love that. So again, because you're a podcast listener, you can get 10% off by using the code WELLANDWEIRD at checkout with circlesofchange.org for any other swag. Okay, guys, I am so honored, delighted, pleasured, that sounds kind of weird, to be back with you guys today. Thank you so much for listening. Next week we have a really amazing guest. I'm going to keep it on lockdown for now and keep it a little secret, but I will see you next week for another episode of Well and Weird. I hope you guys are well. I hope that you're keeping weird and doing weird shit. And I'm going to do the same. So see you guys next week. Bye.